Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on. Well, Mike Michaels is busy in the workshop. He's got a hell of a backlog. So I'm joined by Brian Govberg of Govberg Jewelers. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Absolutely. You've got a really interesting watch for us tonight. But before we talk about that watch, let's do wrist shots.
Okay.
Fire up. And hold it steady so we can see this time. This is a nice one.
It's a pretty nice one. So tonight I have a FP Journe centograph in all aluminum, which they did in a 2-year production cycle.
Mm-hmm. That was the original Centograph Sport, the aluminum model. Materially, just too much for the company to serialize. So if you've got one, you're lucky. If not, one to covet. Beautiful watch. It's everything the Centograph is, but it's also about as light as a swatch. So best of both worlds. Easy to wear, and with it about, what is it now? I think between 90 and 95 degrees here in August in Philadelphia. That's one to that's one to take the weight off your wrist.
Aluminum movement too.
Yeah, that's the other thing. The movements are still aluminum in the titanium versions, but this was the debut of the all aluminum. It's like the Acura NSX for your wrist when that came out in 1990. The all aluminum car. This is the all aluminum Journe. And you know what? It's still a Centograph, so I would be remiss not to fire it up.
I was feeling independent today.
Yeah, exactly, but I'm bump. So you can see 1/100th of a second. That's arguably the signature Journe chronograph. Only watch be darned. All right. So
Thank you.
I'm going to do mine. This is a watch I don't bring out too often, guys. This is my Jaeger-LeCoultre Grand Taille Case Reverso Duo. This is a timepiece that, honestly, I felt like I wasn't wearing enough. And I know some folks say when you're not wearing a watch enough, you should sell it. I say when you're not wearing it enough, you should wear it. So let me just get that off axis so it doesn't block. Yeah, it doesn't get a weird reflection. This one has a black lacquered dial with hand-painted numerals, and then on the reverse side, you can see it's the inverse of your typical Reverso Duo. Silvered on the back, black on the front. It's also got a nice little night and day to it, and this one's in white gold. This is a favorite of mine. I need to wear it more. It'll make a couple of
I haven't seen you wear this one.
No, this is new to Brian.
This is new to me.
This is not a common variant.
You wear the Tur more than that.
That's a fact, I do. I like my complications. But speaking of complications, Watch You Want watch reviews. It's my all watch review channel on YouTube. It's the one you can subscribe to when you've only got 6 or 7 minutes at a pop. I'm updating it daily, and thanks to Govberg, I have some awesome Patek Philippe content. Thank you very much for that 5102 Celestial.
You're very welcome.
I had a good time with that. But there's more coming, and if you've had fun at the hardware store, my Watch You Want watch review channel, Brian, download our Govberg Watchbox app. Tell the folks what they get with that.
Definitely. So with the Govberg Watchbox app, you're going to get a section where it's all the watch news that you can categorize based on your interests, whether you like specific brands or specific types of content. You've got
the valuation feature.
The valuation feature, which is probably our my favorite feature on the app, which you can type in any model for any watch, and it'll give you relevant current market day data on the pre-owned value of a watch, as well as the model details and any related watches that we have for sale.
Yeah. And the cool thing about that is it pulls data from the entire internet, so it's almost like a real-time updating ticker of what your watch is worth, and you can put your whole collection in and get individual watch value or entire collection value, and you can watch it rise and fall with graphs, and we have some exciting projects coming up.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to share what we're doing?
Do you know what? I don't even know what you're allowed to do.
I don't even know. We got some high-tech stuff coming.
But the key feature, too, of the Watchbox is you can store your whole collection. And as you put in the watches and you pick whether or not you have box and papers and things like that, it'll give you the value of your watch based on the details you put in. Over time, we'll be able to give you more and more curated content based on your interests and what watches you have.
Yeah, we're going to have more of our videos on the app, so it's also a viewer for media and video, so definitely download the Govberg Watchbox app.
It's amazing.
Question coming through from Horology Blog before we jump into our talking points. This is from Horology Blog. He's asking, Brian, if you had to pick one Rolex to wear daily forever, what would it be? And Tim, the same. Okay, Brian, you fire first. What you got?
Really tough. I feel like it would be the new ceramic bezel black dial stainless steel Daytona.
Okay.
I just think it's super wearable, goes with everything. It's a little bit more conservative than the white dial, and it's like you could destroy it and it's timeless.
Okay, I have to wear it forever, and I can only have one. Okay, let me just say that I love the Milgauss Z Blue, but I'm gonna go old school here. I would take a white gold, blue dial, day-date oyster quartz.
Are we allowed to go vintage?
Yeah, let's go vintage.
Really? I thought this was like modern era Rolex question.
You can't say like the Rolex, you know, like 4113 and I sell it. This is when you have to buy and wear and keep forever.
Okay, I'd stick with my choice then.
Okay, and I'm gonna stick with mine. Day-date oyster quartz, white gold, blue dial. That's the one forever. Okay, fortunately we don't have to deal with horological monogamy.
Choice too.
Yeah, the Batman's a good choice.
Batman's a good choice too.
That's a good one. That's a good complication you can use all the time. So speaking of Rolex, let's play this or that. Rolex Daytona steel ceramic 116500 LN, your choice of white, silvered, or black dial, or Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch gray side of the moon. As a store of value and as a watch to own, possibly two different perspectives. The Rolex retails for $12,004, the Omega for $12,000. Which one do you pick and why?
So this is for store value? Is that
This is as a store value and as a watch to own. You can have two different answers here if you want.
Okay, so as a store value, by far and away the Rolex Daytona. I mean, we see what the pre-owned values are of the Speedmaster, you know, gray side of the moon, dark side of the moon watches.
Yeah.
Nowhere near the retail values, while the Daytona is bringing, you know, 17,500, 17,000 for the watch. So as far as that goes, it's not really comparable. As far as a watch to own, for me, it's still the Rolex Daytona. I'm a big fan of the gray side of the moon, but it's not my favorite variation of the family of watches.
Okay.
I think the first variation of the watch that they came out with in the all black was the best one.
Okay, now here's how I feel. Now I'm sure Brian's answer, store value, the Rolex, it's unarguable. I can't put any chips in that argument. But I can say that I would rather wear and own the gray side of the moon. To me, it's a more interesting watch. The finish on the case, the fact that they did both brushed and polished gray ceramic, a luminescent tachymetric scale. I love the grained platinum dial. For me, the movement's more interesting and more interesting to look at. The Omega Caliber 9300, coaxial, it's got that George Daniels pedigree. Both of these watches have long power reserves. The Omega 60 hours, the Rolex actually 72. But between the fact that you can't see the Rolex movement and the Omega movement's actually worth seeing, that's not universal for
It's also
automatics.
a little big for me, the Omega. That's the other thing. I feel like it's like a big case size.
I feel that the Rolex does wear smaller until you include the Rolex bracelet. In the end, for me, it feels like a wash because they're both about 50 millimeters from like horn to horn. With the Rolex, you just have to include the bracelet, the solid end link.
Comes on a gray croc too, which is really nice.
Yeah.
I like when you mix up the straps.
And the full ceramic pin buckle, as far as I know, is something literally no one else does. So you're getting a whole lot of materials tech with the Swatch Group. That's something they can do that no one else can. For me, I think the Omega is just more interesting. Technically, I think the Omega is a little bit more sophisticated. It just comes down to me being quirky and I think Brian being the guy who runs the company, and for good reason. I'm picking the irrational watch. So I'm off out in left field, but I will also say this. The Decade from Hell Revisited is a feature that we're going to break out tonight. This is where Brian and I, and that Brian being the sober one and I being the whimsical one, predict our favorite investment grade watches from the 2000s. Let's face it, the 2000s guys were terrible. Terrorism, war, economic implosion, sovereign debt crisis. Not much happened that was good. The Large Hadron Collider did go online in 2008, and it didn't create a black hole. And that was maybe the one break in the clouds. Fortunately, there were some interesting watches. Now, guys, we know 1960s dive watches and Patek Philippe, owned by Eric Clapton, make you bank, but most of us can't get in at the top floor. We have to get in at the ground floor. So, Brian, let's talk about collectible watches that are also investments.
I should preface that every watch that I suggested, I had no idea what year it came out, and it didn't qualify for this, so we had to tailor it down. Tim was very good on the years.
I appreciate that so much, and we do want to distinguish between collectible watches and investment watches. A watch is collectible if people collect it. If there's a community of folks on the internet who will talk all day about Seiko 5s, then that's a collectible watch series, but it's not an investment watch. An investment watch, and this is what I always like to get away from, but today we're going to make commitments, but an investment watch makes you money over time. So, Sean, do you think we can roll through Brian's first and then mine? Good stuff. Okay. Sean, cue in the mics and cue in the cameras. Okay, Brian, what are our investment grade watches from the 2000s?
Okay, so my first one is the Rolex Kermit. Anniversary piece came out in 2003. Investment, so part of this was watches that haven't gone crazy, I guess, right now, or where I think that if you own it now, you could see appreciation in the future.
Yeah, we want to see watches. That's why I ruled out like 60s dive watches and Clapton Pateks. We're not calling the watch that's already at the peak of its value. Watches that have some headroom.
Right. So I think that the Kermit was started being made in 2003. It was somewhat of a cult favorite back then.
Yeah.
People were buying them to wear. Similar to, again, the tool watches from the 60s and 70s. And now we're seeing a lot more people going back and trying to figure out what the modern day, Daytona is going to be. And, what watches can they buy now for a reasonable price that if they hold on to it for 10, 15 years, will appreciate over time. And I think that you're going to see the Kermit being one of those watches, the people that have a complete set, they'll see that watch steadily rise over the next 5 to 10 years. Now, and we're even seeing it now. If you look online, you'll see, before Kermits were selling for $6,000, $7,000, and now, complete sets are bringing anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000.
Now, like you said, a lot of them were used hard and put away wet, which means that effectively, because it was a tool watch and people used Rolex as their beater, a lot of them were very roughly treated, and those original hand-laid factory bevels, and this was one of the last Rolexes to have that feature, the definition of the case, the metal, a lot of that's been lost on many of these. So take the ones that were basically trashed, they're out of the market on a collectible basis. It seems like the middle production, the years between like 2004, 2005, and 2008, are going to be less desirable than the very earliest ones with full sets.
And the last ones.
Yeah.
Well, what's going on right now is that the people are still buying them to wear, and they're, and you have a small group of people that are speculative buying them to hold, and the people that are buying them to wear want the most recent version of the watch because it's technically like the newest.
Yeah.
So, it has, the green plastic card as opposed to paper warranty. So people are paying more for the last iteration of the watch because it's newer.
Yes.
But over time, I think more people will gravitate towards the earliest variations. So in 2003, I think it was like the anniversary year,
Yes.
which is why I think people will want it from the anniversary year.
So if you've got a stamped card and a serial number from 2003, you're good. Just be careful, and this is my buyer beware. If you see one with perforated lugs, look long and hard at that watch and its documentation. Although the press photos for the first versions did show the drilled lugs, I've never seen a production version of that watch with drilled lugs. There's a good chance you're looking at some sort of a retrofit, or, lucky you if you can confirm this, a prototype.
And I mean, also, a lot of people are taking the bezels and swapping out black for green.
Yes.
In order to pick up the value. So be careful when if you're buying it watch only. It's much better to buy with box and papers because it sort of guarantees the authenticity that you are buying an LB.
The other thing you can look at just at a glance is that it has a different dial. A lot of people don't realize that it has what was later called the maxi dial, not the maxi dials from the 70s. That's a different breed. That's like a 5513 thing that guys discuss. I'm talking about the larger white gold indices and hands, the type of dial you saw from 1992 on the Yachtmaster that we didn't get on all subs until the Sub C. So yeah, that's a great one to look at. Boxed sets, early or late, are the ones you want to go with.
Onward. Okay, so all brass movement Journes. Love that man, love FP. So his earliest watches are, I think, some of the nicest watches that have ever been made. And when we say brass movement, Francois Paul converted over from brass movements to rose gold movements in all of his watches, except for some of the sport pieces. And some of the, those brass movement watches are starting to become much more collectible. The older Residences, Residence 1, Residence 2, Residence 2 would be a rose gold movement, but he did the Calendrier, he did the Automatique, he did
Especially on watches that were part of the first, like, 1999 to 2004, 2000. Yeah, I mean, that was like the transition year. The reason Brian mentions 2003 is because that was the end of production for the first tourbillon remontoir. That's a really great watch to have in its earliest variants, especially if you can get one of the first like 400 or so created. They look more handmade, and this is true of a lot of the brass movement Journes. That was back when he was more of a one-man brand.
And people don't realize just how few watches he makes. I mean, even to this day, he's really only making anywhere from 800 to 900 watches for the year. And back then, if you have some of his older brass movement pieces, you think, oh, wow, like, there must be a lot of these. Like, there aren't. Like, there could be 3 to 4 of a watch. Like, we started putting away some brass movement Journes many years ago, the older pieces, and like a rose gold chrono, a couple of others, and we think there was only 3 of those that were even made. So, they're really cool, really collectible, and you can still get them at a reasonable price. I think you're going to see them double and triple over the next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, the early Journe, back when he was producing 100, 200, 300 watches a year, they show more evidence of hand manufacture, which is charming and desirable.
Patina on the dials.
Yeah. A lot of times they had very thick varnish on the dial that creates almost the look of floating print. Oversized screws. A lot of the earlier ones, they feature the Eleanor cases that were made in France and feature the French hallmarks. The earliest, I think if you had whether it's like first, second, third, or fourth series, first generation Journe tourbillon with a brass movement, you're absolutely golden. But the bottom line is, it isn't just the rock star models. All of the brass movement watches are going to become collectible in time. Even at 900 watches a year today. Yeah,
I mean, you're talking, he produces how many watches he makes for each reference. So he'll tell you, of the black label pieces, it's anywhere from 1 to 2 per year. Of some of the others, it could be 5, 6, 11, chronometric blue being the most. Yeah. But every day I feel like I see a different older brass movement piece that like pops up on Instagram or something like that, where I'm like, oh my God, like I have to have that watch. It's amazing.
Yeah, I almost feel like the brass movement, like pre-2004 Journes, someday we're going to look at them almost like Breguet pocket watches made during the lifetime of the master. They're that desirable. And believe me, 900 watches a year today is his production number. Back then it was a lot less. So that's a constrained supply of watches, not getting any bigger, being scattered to the 4 corners of the earth. There are quite a few collectors who buy these and just sit on them forever. So the market does get smaller each year, even as the market for them gets richer each year. Now we have an interesting question, Brian, in the midst of your picks. This one's coming from Jeff. Jeff Chow. Tim and Brian, Rolex GMT Master 116710 BLNR. This is the Batman. Is it a collectible or is it investment grade?
I think it's both. I mean, the watch continues to surprise me because, it's been out for a long time. Like, they've sold a lot of them, and it's still bringing in the secondary market $8,000. So, which is
very close to retail.
Which is very close to retail. So you think, at some point you would think like they should go down, but they don't. People continue to want them. Stores continue to not have them in stock. And every single one that we get that we put on the website just flies. So, I think it's a collectible watch, and I think, I don't necessarily think it's gonna, we'll see if they discontinue the watch or maybe they change it for a different color combination, in which case, it could be an investment grade watch. But for right now, I would just say it's collectible and a good store value.
Yeah, I would say that it's certainly collectible because it's got this going for it. It was the first ever Rolex GMT to use that color combination. So it's easy to surpass ultimates, like the most expensive, the biggest, the most complicated. All those things get surpassed in time. But when Rolex does a first, that's forever. So it's got that mitigating against loss of value and interest. I do think the sheer volume of them means that if you want it to be an investment, you pretty much have to buy it and put it in a freezer. Like, I don't think it's going to be a watch that makes you money over the years. I think it'll be a good store of value. So I would say definitely on collectability. It's a special interest watch for Rolex fans. I'm 50-50 on investment grade, but I do believe that 20, 30 years from now, if someone has one sitting in a box that they bought and basically just threw in the safe,
it'll be worth more than what you paid.
I think a time capsule version of this watch will be a moneymaker, but what's the fun in that? Also, I'll say this about the Batman. I thought it and the Pepsi, the white gold Pepsi, were going to be like end of cycle models for this version of the GMT. Now, I guess 17-year and ongoing life of the 6-digit Daytona might mitigate against that kind of prediction, but I did feel like this marked sort of the last phase of that first supercase GMT's life. Like at some point,
we know what everybody's waiting for. They're waiting for a steel Pepsi to come along, which I don't think you're necessarily going to see, and I think that, the next one is going to be the Coke. I have a feeling a Coke and steel, I think, is somewhere in the cards in the future. But they do surprise us. So.
My theory there is that we're going to see a Coke and steel, like Brian says, and then the steel Pepsi, just to not completely backstab the guys who bought the white gold Pepsi. The steel Pepsi will be the debut reference for the new model GMT someday. So it's not a steel version of the same generation.
Cool.
It's going to be the first model in the next generation. So if you bought that white gold Pepsi, you still have exclusivity. Okay, so
we thought on the Sky Dweller too.
Yeah, well, okay. The Sky Dweller is a little bit different.
Yeah.
You got to pay for that caliber. There's a lot of investment in the 4160 and 4161. Okay, so Patek Philippe, you've got one more investment grade watch.
I've got one more. So I picked the Patek Philippe 5565A. Steel 36 millimeter, created in, was it 2006? 2006?
Yeah, it was 2006.
2006, and in addition to 300 watches for the opening of the Geneva boutique. It was the first time in an extremely long amount of time, you probably know how long, I don't, that they did a steel Calatrava. It had a track dial, bicolor. Watch was gorgeous. I mean, just a perfect...
Good size, too.
Good size, like a traditionalist size.
Yeah, like a 36 and less than 8 millimeters thick.
Exactly. And I just think the watch is absolutely gorgeous. It's underappreciated. I think people don't even know it exists. I mean, Jaeger built the watch this year.
Yeah, I was going to say, emulated by others, I can think of at least one company that knows it exists.
But no, I don't think people really know it exists. You see very few of them because they were sold to
super fans
and customers of the brand itself out of Geneva. So it's not like they popped up all over the world. It was really confined to one market, and it was long enough ago that the world was like, the world, not to like go off on a tangent, but like the watch world was different, and they stayed very contained to that market, I think. And now, when I see them, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, people bought them to own. That's the key thing. These went to end users, and so a large proportion of them went into collections of guys who got on a wait list for a watch that probably cost like 1/20th of what they were able to spend on a timepiece. So these are not guys who got it because they needed to sell it as an investment return someday or ever. So a lot of these simply disappeared into the collections of super collectors who never sell. So you're dealing with less than 300.
We actually just took in a sealed one.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty excited.
So that's a time capsule watch and an interesting prospect. Thinner than a Royal Oak Ultra Thin. I mean, thinner than a Royal Oak 15202, and by a lot. So
I just wish it had a sapphire crystal case back. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
But all their anniversary pieces are solid with the like an engraving or something.
I will say this: I measured two Patek Philippe 3970s the other day. One had a solid case back. One had a display case back. The display case back adds about 1 millimeter. So for those of you who are strict traditionalists and believe finish is there to impress the watchmaker who services it, and you like the thinnest possible watch, this is old school. Plus it does have a nice engraved case back. It has the image of the boutique.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have my picks. Now these are Tim's picks, Tim's choices, investment grade watches, and Brian led out...
You cheated though because your first one is has already appreciated.
True, but I feel there's headroom, and I think that the more people think about the era, the more this one will go up in value. So the 2005 one-year Patek Philippe Nautilus 3712. Now, if you're familiar with the 5712, it's the model that killed this one. So a one-year steel Nautilus. This is a timepiece that trades between 55 and 85,000, and it's very dependent on what the condition of the watch is, whether it's a full accessory set, and as Brian referenced, whether it's a sealed example. But the fact is, even the most accessibly priced versions are still priced by the aftermarket considerably higher than the $33,200 you'll pay new retail for the 5712. This is a watch that already has a following as a one-year Nautilus complication. Again, if you can afford to get into this watch, you will make money on it, even with services factored in. But like Brian said, this one is semi-discovered.
Yeah, and it's a little speculative too, because I think for a lot of people, it looks pretty much exactly the same. So you have to say to yourself, do I want two 5712s or like one of these?
Yeah.
And you have and if you're wearing it and enjoying it, I think that you're going to see the most gain in ones that are unworn, and I don't know how many people didn't wear them.
Yeah, it's a sports watch that, for investment purposes, you probably shouldn't wear. So you got to weigh that. Also, if you're that guy who likes to have the only example of a certain vintage watch, like bezel and dial combination in the room, this watch is not going to bring you much psychic satisfaction.
It's like nice 5712. No, it's the 3712. Oh, okay.
No, look, the little index at 6 is square and not cut off. You know, it's that sort of thing. But I will say this, if you want a watch that cannot be missed and you want to sort of sort the wheat from the chaff, no Royal Oak offshore deserves to be classified as chaff, although some will argue the point on the Survivor. But the bottom line is that the best of the limited editions, by not unanimity, but I think at least plurality opinion, is the 2006 Audemars Piguet reference 26078 Rubens Barrichello II. This is a watch, they made 1,000 in titanium, 500 in rose gold, 150 in platinum. The titanium is the buy. Originally retailed for $30,000, they trade typically from mid-30s to high 40s depending on condition, accessory set. Again, your mileage may vary, but all of them trade at higher than the original retail, and people just love the watch. It's technically a 42, but it wears larger, and it was probably the high water mark of both AP's Driver series offshores and the whole offshore limited edition as a species.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably like the apex of like all the hype, everything coming into one watch. That and probably the Schumachers.
Yeah, I would say the Schumachers.
But this one definitely, I think you're right on the money.
Yeah, because we got to pull from the 2000s here. It's the decade from hell. So I can't like throw the LeBron in there, even though that's a worthy addition. But this is definitely the best of the limited edition Royal Oak offshores from the 2000s. You and I are in agreement about older Journe. Mm-hmm. I think one of the most intriguing is the 2001 to 2003 FP Journe Tourbillon Remontoir Ruthenium series. Now the Ruthenium series, there were 5 references. This one's interesting because it's so different from
the
Journe
guy has that watch, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It's amazing. He's got the best watches.
This is the kind of watch that sets itself apart not just from the other Rutheniums, but from all the other first generation Journe tourbillon. Now all first generation Journe tourbillon, if you put them together, maybe 300 to 400 watches total by the end of 2003. This one's 99 pieces, and it's the only 40 millimeter platinum first generation FP Journe tourbillon. So if you want a 40 millimeter first gen FP Journe tourbillon, you want the Ruthenium. It's the only one like it, and again, it looks like none other. So it's not like the 3712, 5712 thing where you could easily miss the difference.
He coded the movements too. They're so cool.
The movement is brass coated with ruthenium, the dial is ruthenium coated, and it's bigger than the standard tourbillon remontoir. So 3 factors that set it apart even from an arm's length. This is a great watch. Prices start at like $150,000 pre-owned, but believe me,
people love them.
Yeah, you'll make money on this, hand over fist. If you can afford to get in now. And finally, and Brian, this is my most speculative. I know you're probably like shaking your head, like as I launch.
Who are they?
Okay, I'm gonna go all out, take a risk, and this is the tail end of the decade from hell, but the 2009 mb&f HM3. mb&f was by far the greatest branding success of the 2000s, taking all the momentum of the Harry Winston Opus series that was conceived by Maximilian Bucer and rolling it into a more approachable and friendly and fun brand concept. They started in 2005, but the 2009 HM3 was easily the watch that put them on the map. Of all the horological machines, this was the one that broke, this was the one that snapped the cable as they untethered themselves from the mainstream of horology, including independent horology. 19 variants were made, everything from the Megawind to the Moon Machine to the Frog. I mean, they've all got names.
The Moon Machine was beautiful. That was with Sarpaneva, right?
It was.
That's my favorite one.
So there were collaborations built in. All told, somewhere between 400 and 450 made before the final edition of 2015. Prices start at $55,000, roll up to about $85,000, depending on which one you're into. They're yet to gain, but I believe they are likely past bottom out value. This is an increasingly iconic watch from an increasingly iconic brand. If mb&f disappeared off the face of the earth tomorrow, they would not be forgotten. You cannot say that about all independents right now.
That is very true. It'll be interesting because I think that, from what I understand, they have a very established collector base.
Yes.
And a lot of the people that buy their watches have bought a lot of them. And I haven't really seen too many pop up available for sale yet. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. It'll be, time will tell, I guess.
Yeah, so this is speculative. Anything mb&f is still so much of our era that it's hard to say. And the HM3 only coming out in 2009, that's like the era of mb&f becoming mb&f, you know? So we wait and see, but I feel confident with that pick. Question coming in from, this is actually a question from CQ, an old friend of the house.
Ah, hey CQ.
FP Journe versus Laurent Ferrier. So what's your take, Brian?
I mean, you know what I'm going to say? It's not even close for me. I mean, I think that FP Journe continues to innovate in the industry, from the Vagabondage 3 to new watches that he's coming out with that he hasn't announced yet, to the
Calendars
Ressence,
that you can use entirely from the crown.
Not needing a pusher and the correctors behind the lugs. I mean, the guy is a genius. And, while, again, we don't carry Laurent Ferrier and, they are beautiful watches, I think that maybe he excels more at the refinishing process or the finishing process. Yeah. I mean, he does beautiful time-only watches, and those are all the ones that I've seen, but it's hard for me to really compare the two.
I would say this, Journe has been more adventurous. Like, Laurent Ferrier will never do an elegant 48. Whether or not you like the model is largely irrelevant. That was an ambitious, a non-round men's quartz watch. That was ballsy, and Journe did it. Laurent Ferrier would not do that. Now, where I'll say Laurent Ferrier has the edge, perhaps, is in some of the technology that's being adopted. Synthetics in the watch, that's something FP Journe tried on a prototype basis and decided he did not want to do because he didn't feel it would be watchmaker serviceable into the future. Now, I will say this, Laurent Ferrier, if you just look at their rank and file pieces, they probably finish better than Journe on his rank and file pieces. The absolute top end, where you're buying something like a Journe Sonnery.
But price point wise, though, I mean, what you're paying for a time-only watch from one brand versus a time-only watch from another are two different things.
Yeah, the thing about it is Laurent Ferrier has one level of finish. Journe has a couple of different ones. And so that would be the one area where I think maybe Laurent Ferrier has a little bit of an edge, but that's not to say Journe's manufacturer can't or doesn't do it. It's just something that's reserved for a couple of showpiece, ultra haute de gamme references. So I think for the most part, Journe, but for me, from a movement snob's perspective, direct impulse escapements, they've got that going. Synthetics, they've got that going. Micro rotors, case back tourbillon.
They do a nice micro rotor, I give them that.
Yeah. More competitive than any brand that new should be with someone like Journe, who's been making his own watches since 1983. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about your favorite independents.
My favorite independents.
Yeah, let's talk about your favorite independent brands.
Okay, well, we can skip Journe because we already talked about him a lot.
A man, a brand, a plan. Journe.
Journe. Number 2 is Ressence.
Ressence of Antwerp and Geneva.
Yeah.
Let me clarify that.
So I think that they don't try and define themselves, I would say, as, well, they are a watch brand, but the person behind the brand, doesn't try and sell himself off as a watchmaker.
In fact, he's kind of almost a background guy. He lets the watches be the stars.
Exactly, and he's a designer that understands the watch business, but he came up with an innovative way to tell time that nobody else was doing. And he put it all together, I think, in an amazing, it came out beautifully.
Yeah.
And price point wise, for like the Type 1s, you can get one for under $20,000, which I think for a lot of people that want to get into an independent and not, one of the larger brands, it's hard, the price points for Laurent Ferrier or Vaude or even FP Journe, it's very prohibitive, and I think that Ressence allows somebody that wants to get into a unique brand, in a reasonable way. Yeah,
so these are kind of the best of all worlds. They've got an ETA 2824 movement in there, and they're very open about that.
They're proud about it.
Yeah, the ROCS system is a wonderful example of how you can take a rock-solid base movement and then add real value on top. So I love that it infuriates the movement snobs, and at the same time, it shows what an établisser can do with like blue sky imagination.
And they only make like 300 watches per year, so you got to figure few ADs in the country, maybe 100 or so watches. It's it's not very much.
You'll never see another one, and even within that 300, there's the Type 1, the Type 3, the Type 5. There are special editions. They did a Captain America version, a blue version. They've done a Mr. Porter version, a Hodinkee version. They do mix it up so that
The Type 2 is probably my favorite version, I think. Like the classic.
The Type 2, yes. So the cool thing here is that this is a brand that is approachable, fun, reasonably priced, and could be a great gateway brand for people coming from like the Rolex, the Omega world, because it's a big step up from, the mid-15s to get yourself like a steel Daytona, steel ceramic Daytona, and then you step into that $20,000 range. All of a sudden you have so many options, from entry-level Journe to maybe buying a pre-owned Patek Philippe. I mean, you've got a lot of options. You can go for an Aquanaut there. Vacheron has options.
And it's a talking piece.
Yeah.
And it's what you want to watch to be. You want somebody to see it and maybe start a conversation.
Yeah, it's still compelling versus the huge number of things you can buy for the same price, and it's fun. So I also love their oil-filled dials. Not the first to do that, but definitely the first to do it this well. So tell me,
Number 3.
Let me hand model this for you, Brian.
Beautiful. So
Camera Brian.
here we have a 1-of-1 Maitre du Temps, and this is their Chapter 3. Do they see it on the camera? Okay, so the Chapter 3 is the first round. Well, it's not the first round watch they did, but I'd say it's the first like truly wearable round watch. That
They did a Chapter 1 that
Which was
had
huge.
Yeah, I mean it was round, but it was round like the Earth is round.
Yeah. So the movement. I mean, it's like the best part. Well, it's not the best part, but the dial's amazing. But no. So the movement was designed by Voutilanen.
Yeah.
Who anybody that knows all the independents will know who he is.
And Andreas Streller, who is possibly the #1 prototypist and industrialization specialist in high horology. So he basically designed how the complication would be hidden, and also how the watch would be produced.
Exactly. So it's a hidden GMT, which, as you know, I love because I don't like GMT hands.
Yeah.
And I just think that the watch is super wearable. It brings together a lot of the best of what independents can do.
Talk about the collaboration, just the concept, and how Stephen Holtzman kind of brought that into being.
So he started in what, 2003?
In 2005, 2003 he had the idea. 2005 he created the company.
So in 2005 he brought together a group of prevalent watchmakers at the time. I think Roger Dubuis was involved in that in the Type 1.
Christophe Claret.
Christophe Claret. Well, he designed the movement. And was Peter Speak-Marin involved in that one?
I believe he came on board for the
Was it
one.
Chapter 2?
He was definitely on board for the 2. The Chapter 2 was Peter Speak-Marin and Daniel Roth.
Yes.
But definitely, I believe the first one might have been Daniel Roth, Christophe Claret, and Roger Dubuis initially.
So essentially similar concept to mb&f, except that mb&f would focus, I think, more on one big watchmaker.
Yeah.
And
with the Opus series at Harry Winston, Max Bousset also focused on one big watchmaker at a time.
exactly. Whereas Maitre du Temps, I'm saying it, it sounds much better when you have a French accent, but
We call it MDT
Maitre du
around here.
Temps, but brings together some of the biggest watchmakers to all work together on an amazing piece. And a lot of these Chapter 3s have been done in 1-of-1s or only ones. This one happens to be a 1-of-1 where the discs that go,
the shutters.
The shutters are purple.
That's a really cool example of what
Yeah.
they can do, because you can get a lot of customization, and I would say as a percentage of what they do, customization on the MDT watches is probably higher as a percentage of their output than any other smaller independent
They haven't
brand.
made that many. I bet you less than 100 of these.
You can get the barrels custom painted, you can get the dials customized, you can get engravings. So there's really a relationship between the manufacturer and the customer that even at the independent level is not universal. So this is one of the reasons why we love them. And I think the Chapter 3 is their breakout watch.
Yeah, exactly.
The one was overwhelming and impressive in its complexity, but Christophe Claret, who manufactured it, does a lot of stuff like that. The Chapter 2 was a wonderful calendar watch, but again, there's the wearability factor. This, I can wear this on my baby wrist, so for perspective. But yeah, that was in my opinion, the breakout watch for that brand. Now, my favorite independents, okay, so I've got a couple myself. Lange and Heyne of Dresden. They've been around since 2001. Of the two founding partners, Marco Lange is the one who remains with the company and continues to advance the state of the art for them. A small shop led by an AHCI member, and a great one. They make 50 to 75 watches a year, and most of them are completely bespoke. So this is the interesting thing. Existing models and calibers are suggestions only at Lange Heyne. They do movements that are riotous, and I mean, how about engraving, inking, black polish, chaton holding screws on a mammoth ivory set of bridges and plates. Mammoth ivory, and yes, that's finished too. Diamond capstones, handmade hairsprings, handmade balance wheels. This is as good as it gets, and the pricing is incredibly fair. They have many watches available for under $100,000, and if that sounds like a lot of money, you're right. But for this level of work, you know, building a house is not much easier. You're getting a great deal when you work with Marco Lange. De Bethune, I'm going to get a little choked up here, and I might shed a tear. This is not just, in my opinion, the coolest independent around. It might be the coolest watch manufacturer, period. I don't know how they're not on the cover of every watch magazine every month forever. But Denis Flageolet and David Zanetta, later joined by executive Pierre Jacques to add a little bit of kind of business gravitas to the company. But mb&f makes exuberant and fun watches. They make watches that are inspired by spacecraft. De Bethune watches look genuinely like alien technology, like Zeta Reticulon, like just crashed in Arizona. Like, it's that good and that cool. They make my dream watch, the DB28 Digital, but at the same time, they have a series called Dream Watch that surpasses anything I could imagine. The Dream Watch 5 is otherworldly. I don't know of any other way to describe it. These watches pioneer everything from technology to finishing methods that no one else is using. Heat blued titanium. Yes, they use silicon balances and escape wheels, but they're working with technologies like Ressence, a 20,000 hertz, purely mechanical, magnetic assisted escapement. Are you kidding me? Like, this is like Patek Philippe Advanced Research meets the Pentagon's DARPA. Like, they shouldn't even be playing with stuff like that. For a company that makes maybe 400, aspiring to make 500 a year, this is just stupid cool, stupid crazy stuff. And I defy you to tell me anyone makes a more beautiful watch than the DB28 kind of blue tourbillon meteorite. From aesthetics to finish to fit, even the parts of a watch reimagined with blue sky and genius. That's De Bethune. I've said my piece. That's about as good as it gets. Brian,
so wait, tell us what you really think about them.
Do we have another hour?
Yeah.
We're going to do a 24-hour simulcast. Okay, Brian,
so I guess we'll wrap up with this.
Take us home. I'm the pre-owned guy, and I've been touting pre-owned for years. You get value. You get a watch that has...
I thought I was the pre-owned guy. I'm the pre-owned guy.
I'm wrenching it away from you. Your name is Govberg. You distribute 50 original brands, authorized. So you can do things I can't. I've been working in kind of the minor leagues, and now I'm at Govberg, and we've got new watches, and like my eyes are doing a chameleon, shooting in different directions at the same time. So tell me, why would you buy a new watch? I've been pumping pre-owned for years. I've got my reasons, but I've also bought new watches. And so tell me, why should my next watch be new? Give me examples of when it would be smart to do that.
Okay, so I guess the first time it would be smart is if a watch comes out that's brand new,
yes,
that you really like, where there's going to be some lag time before it actually hits the secondary market. Yeah. So, you do have some people that will, buy a watch and trade out of it very quickly, and some people will have the ability to purchase it pre-owned, but for the most part, there's probably a year or two cycle before they hit the market in mass. So that would be the first thing, is if you see a watch that you really like, that you don't want to wait to buy it pre-owned, or it's not going to be available for a while. The second time is if a watch is available, but it's highly collectible, highly desired. Let's use the Nautilus line, for example, where all of the watches are selling at or even above retail for the most part. So just getting the watch new itself is even difficult. And in those situations where you have a very tight difference between what the watch sells for new and what the watch sells for pre-owned, which can even just be a couple of $1,000s sometimes, I would say in those instances, if you can find the watch new, it might be worth it to just buy it new because you're getting the full manufacturer's warranty, you're buying it brand new, and you know you have an AD standing behind it. You know, even though we do stand behind all of our pre-owned watches, but you know, in those situations, you know, you can just buy it new and it makes sense.
And let me just throw in there that I bought my Duomet new years ago, and at the time it had been out on the market for a couple of years, and I could easily have bought a pre-owned one, but I felt like the watch was a little bit of a science project, frankly, and I wanted a factory warranty on that watch. And in the end, when looping the movement, I did find a fingerprint, and I actually sent that in for a factory warranty claim, and they honored it, and they did a great job. But my point is, if that had been like some aftermarket vendors, like house warranty, yeah, my guy can clean it up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
You know, he's got these, you know, what are they called? Like the things you get in the net.
Use a paper clip as a pusher.
Yeah, you know, it's Q-tip and a little bit of alcohol.
But no. So, and then the final thing I would be, I think a lot of watches now, the appreciation or the collectability is at the time in which the watch is being sold. So, you know, when the Omega Snoopy came out, where Omega's had an amazing run with their limited editions. Even, you know, the Speedy Tuesday now as an example, it's selling for thousands of dollars over list. But, you know, the watch itself is becoming worth more in the secondary market at the point in which it's being sold brand new. So in those situations, if you build rapport with your authorized dealer, you'll have access to the best watches. And as new watches come out, maybe it's this year, maybe it's 3 years from now, there's going to be a watch that comes out that's brand new that you're going to want, that's going to be hard to get. And in those situations, if you buy new and you have a track record of buying new, you should have the relationship to be able to buy the watch.
Yeah, it's like being able to go on the short line or the VIP line at Euro Disney. You cut right to the ride.
It's like TSA pre-check, basically.
Exactly. It's like global entry. There you go. So that's Brian Govberg, his favorite independents, his investment grade picks. If you're just tuning in, guys, this is one you're going to want to watch taped. We had some great choices tonight and some great discussion on new watches, pre-owned watches, Rolex versus Omega, independents we love, and watches we consider investments. So, Brian, thanks for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. Thanks for bringing this little friend right here.
Yeah, of course.
One last shot for those of you who are just tuning in. Maitre du Temps, Chapter 3. And just as we're closing the shutters on that one, we're closing the curtain on tonight's show. I'm Tim, he's Brian. They're the three amigos. This is Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on.